Okay, I think we're going to go ahead and get things started. So thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon for the webinar that is going to be focused on the changing federal landscape and positioning yourself for competitiveness. Just as a quick introduction, my name is Chris Gray. I work for Hanover Research, a grants consulting firm located in the Washington, D.C. area. Before we get started, I wanted to introduce you to my colleague, Katie Tun-Eisinger, who is coming in as American's additional point of contact. If you do receive follow-up support or individual support from us, you'll be interfacing directly with Katie. So just wanted to give her a chance to say hello.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, everyone. I hope to have the opportunity to work with you all. I work with Jennifer to coordinate the support of our consultants for trainings like this and for individual PI support. So please do reach out to Jennifer if you have an interest in working with us for proposal review, revision, consultation, etc. We're happy to meet with you.
With that, also wanted to introduce my colleague, Steve Jacks. Steve is a senior grants consultant on our team. He put together today's presentation and will be delivering today's session. So Steve, take it away.
Okay, thanks so much, Chris. All right, and welcome everyone. Thanks for coming out. So just as a little brief introduction to myself. So as Chris said, my name's Steve Jacks. I'm a senior grants consultant here at Hanover Research. I work with our clients primarily in the NIH and NSF space, but lots of other funders as well, helping them to secure about $67 million of funding since I started at Hanover in 2018. Before that, I was an investigator myself, so I worked in the field of cognitive neuroscience and neurorehabilitation, and I worked at a medical center research institute for about 14 years as both a postdoc and then as an individual investigator with my own funding. So hopefully I can bring some of that experience to the talk today. And having at least a little sense of the many challenges that all of you have been encountering over the since January. So, and we'll kind of talk about all of that. So, just as a big high level overview, I'm going to talk for hopefully about 40 minutes, maybe even a little less. Just to give time for lots of different questions, and then we'll have about a 15-minute Q&A session. Then we've got a little announcement coming at the very end. We're going to make sure to give everyone the slides, and I've got many of the slides I've got hyperlinks to. So for additional information where I haven't gone into detail or I've provided some potentially useful resources going forward to do that. So we'll make sure to get you a copy of those. And since we're a relatively small group. What I'm going to do is, if you do have any questions along the way, I will take those. Either you can go ahead and unmute yourself or drop a question in the chat and I'll get to it as quickly as I can. I've got a chat window open here, so I can respond to anybody. And with that, I'll give you just sort of a high-level overview of what the agenda is today. So unless you have been in a coma for the last 7 months, there have been lots of changes to the federal funding landscape. And so the first part of my talk is really going to be talking about, what have those changes have been, both what have they been already, and also start to speculate a little bit on what the future might hold and sort of where things are. I will be, where necessary, I will be hopefully appropriately clear about how certain or uncertain I am. There's, lots of rumors going around that people are trying to discern information about what the best strategy is, going forward with all the changes at the federal landscape. And then the second half of the talk is really going to be about, what do you do with all of these changes? How do we move forward and continue to have a productive research career? So I'm gonna talk a little bit about different approaches that one could take. One of which is looking for alternative funding sources such as foundation funding. And I know my colleague Rob Guroff actually back in May gave a presentation on that. And if you weren't able to see that, we can work to make sure that you have access to that. I'm going to intentionally not duplicate any of that information just because you may have already been exposed to it. And then just also talking about some really kind of practical ways of going forward and being as productive as possible in this environment. And one sort of caveat before I really dive in, talking to lots of different people here with from lots of different backgrounds, lots of different potential funders, and with all the changes that are going on, I'm really going to talk pretty high level in terms of some generalities. I'm not going to go in, I'm intentionally not going into sort of very detailed discussion of specific funders because I know that's not necessarily going to be relevant for everyone here. So, but if you do have any particular questions, about the specific funder, specific opportunity, I'll do my best to answer those. Some I may or may not have, any additional information that I can provide. And in other cases, it might just be we can work to try to find you some additional information offline rather than doing it online. So with that, what I'm going to do, just so you can focus on the content of the talk, I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off, and I'll come back on during the Q&A session at the end of the talk. So with that, going to go ahead and start talking a little bit about the evolving federal landscape. And, I think if there's one word to describe what's been going on over the last, 7 months or so, it's just been uncertainty. There have just been lots of changes, oftentimes very rapid, that sort of came on very rapidly. And, many people were able to sort of follow those changes early on, and then after a while, it became really hard to track all the information coming out. So it just happens to be that at Hanover, one of my jobs is to be the person who has been tracking all the news over the last 7 months to try to keep track of what are changes going on. And I'm going to try to consolidate that information and and particularly what's most relevant now. And I can kind of group that into kind of three, not completely independent, but relatively independent concepts. So, the changes that have been sort of first, an increased high-level political involvement in funding. So, the administrative branch of the government has always been very critically involved in funding, but it's been at a little bit lower level. So there hasn't been as much sort of involvement of sort of presidentially dictated goals having to be implemented within individual funders to the extent as it has in the past. So talk a little bit about what that is, and just last week there was a relatively big announcement that'll go over an executive order that again, as we've seen before, we've seen kind of executive orders which then over the next few months get trickled down into specific funders. So talk a little bit about that process and what to expect. Second is both implemented and potential funding cuts. So as many of you know, we are, Congress is going through the budget appropriation process, and lots of information going out, lots of proposals out there, sometimes keeping track of, who is proposing what and what the potential impacts are going to be can be really challenging to follow. So I'll give a little brief summary of that. Again, a lot of that's in the works, but we'll talk a little bit about what is kind of currently known. And then finally, I'll briefly touch on the role and involvement of AI in the grant writing process in particular. And as many of you, especially faculty members, know, it's been sort of a challenging time as AI technology has developed. And how it's significantly changing the writing process, and the same goes for grants. And there have been some pretty recent changes, really starting at NIH, that I'll talk a little bit about, and how that might affect sort of grant writing in the future. So kind of start off with those areas and do a little bit deeper dive into each of these. So, um, as many of you know, there have been a lot of changes that first came out in terms of executive orders, which were then implemented at the various funders, oftentimes in the form of budget cuts or cuts to grants that had previously been funded that were no longer funded, to really a wide area, a wide range of topic areas. So, most kind of publicly, anything related to so-called DEI initiatives, as well as what the administration terms gender ideology extremism, as well as K-12 education, especially any kind of research going on at the federal level, where we've seen very big changes to the Department of Education and that are still ongoing. A lot of cuts made to, many topics related to LGBTQ, as well as HIV, AIDS, COVID, vaccine research, arts and humanities. Have seen some big changes, as well as institutions as a whole. So not only are we seeing grants cut for particular content within the grants, but also at institutions that the administration deems sort of not compliant with their overall goals, or having historical trend, accusations of misalignment with federal priorities. So, um, those we've already seen, and many of which we would expect to continue. By this point in time, I would have expected a little bit more changes in the some of the formal guidance that funders are providing. So far, we're really not seeing as much of that as I would have anticipated, 6 months ago. I'll talk a little bit more later in the talk about how to deal with that and how to sort of gain that information when many of these changes are the kind of funding priorities are not really being specified, especially those areas that are being kind of not considered anymore. And then sort of on the flip side, there have been some areas that have gained increased interest. So things like AI research, really very broadly, as well as quantum computing, in the health space, chronic diseases, rural health, and sort of rural life more generally. And then in terms of science, a lot of interest in energy independence and things related to domestic energy generation. And then in sort of the humanities and the arts, focused on sort of very kind of American first patriotic emphasis on and what is in the humanities world, and the National Endowments for the Humanities talk about American exceptionalism. So lots of different kind of politically motivated changes there. And one of the challenges has been is sort of, this was initially implemented in a pretty non-precise way, in terms of a lot of Doge using keywords to cut fundings, oftentimes cutting inappropriately. And now we're getting a little bit more structure in place. So as I mentioned, I think it was last Thursday, there was a new executive order that came out for improving oversight of federal grant making. And this is, something that if you've sort of heard the rumors or listened to the sort of inside information that's coming out from, leaked information from program officers, we were already kind of seeing this, but, now done. Now this is a lot more formalized in this executive order, and again, waiting to be implemented at the individual federal funder level. But a couple key points, and the biggest one being that each federal agency is going to have to appoint a senior political appointee who's going to be responsible really for two things. So one, reviewing new funding opportunity announcements to make sure that they are in alignment with the agency priorities, as well as sort of the higher level, what has been termed national interest, that's sort of dictated by the administration, as well as, the final funding decision making that goes on for individual grants. So this is, potentially going to make some very big changes, and there's some kind of clauses in the executive order that really talk a bit about how much leeway that this political appointee has in making funding decisions and how much they can sort of downplay or even ignore the typical peer review process that has really been the heart of most research related grant and endeavors. And so I think that's a big point where we're going to have to wait and see how big those changes are and how de-emphasize that peer review processes. But just understand that now there's really going to be someone at that end, at sort of the beginning stage, at the funding announcement, as well as the funding decision stage, that's really going to be critically evaluating grants. And as sort of a side product, and sort of most immediately, what we're going to see is federal-wide pause on new funding solicitations until these new agency appointees are in place and are able to approve things. So funding opportunities are already out there. They are all in play. They continue to be in use. They, of course, will be affected by that late stage decision making process, but any new solicitations, especially ones that you might be waiting on, you will probably be waiting for a little while longer. And wish I could be more specific about a little while longer, but that is really yet to be seen. And then the executive order disqualifies programs that promote, some specifics, as well as, but these, again, will not necessarily be an exhaustive list of the things that these political appointees are going to be looking at, but they're one of the things that they're going to be looking at. And, kind of consistent with the what we've seen previously, any work that, allegedly involves racial preferences or discrimination, any kind of gender identity that denies a sort of binary sex, any kind of support for so-called illegal immigration, and anything that compromises public safety or promotes, quote, anti-American values. So again, consistent with the prior cuts that we've seen, and then a few things where there kind of new points of view that have been put in is that grants are going to be encouraged, first to go to institutions with lower indirect cost rates. So those of you who have not been following, that was kind of historically, or in the last few months, been a big point of contention is, the indirect cost rates that institutions are getting. And this is sort of a formal process for, allowing kind of preferences for schools for granting agencies to make decisions based on those indirect cost rates, and sort of how institutions are going to respond to that. I think is really a big question. And it's also the goal to avoid repeated grantees, to and try to expand the pool of recipients. And many funding agencies have already some structures in place to expand the pool of recipients, but this is going to become a bigger part of that. It also encourages grants to include benchmarking and measurable successes and impacts. This is something that has historically been a good thing to do anyway, but it's going to be increasingly important. And that grants are going to adhere to what are called the gold standard science, which is a separate executive order that had been put out, a lot centered around reproducibility, research integrity, things like that. So the other thing that this executive order does allow is for grants now to be basically canceled at will. So for new grants going forward, that's going to be part of the contract language federal, at the federal funding level wide. And so, the executive branch will now have or the individual funders are going to have more power to cut grants even, in the middle of the execution, if they are deemed, to be no longer compliant with funding priority changes. So, there we're going to see, a lot of changes. So that's kind of what's happened. Again, a lot of this is just, not even a week old. But so, in terms of, what's going to be coming down the pipe in the next, 6 months, year, when you're writing grants or thinking about writing grants, really needing to satisfy both the reviewers, which you always had to do, as well as these political appointees. And the biggest challenge is going to be trying to figure out what those priorities are that the political appointees have. And this is going to be my first plug of many within this talk for um, continuing to engage with your program officers at your particular funder that you might be targeting for any kind of feedback. So they may or may not know what the political appointees are going to be prioritizing. They may or may not be able to share that information or be willing to share that information. But if anyone knows what those priorities are going to be outside of the standard funder priorities, information that are on, funder websites, things like that, they are probably going to be a good resource to know what's up to date in terms of what those political appointees are going to be looking for. And then also we need to, keep an eye out for any potential changes to the review process. I haven't heard anything official yet on, is peer review going away? I don't think it is. And for many funders, it's part of the, it's a federal requirement. That is, they can't just get rid of it, but we'll have to see if that changes or if the processes that peer reviewers use is going to change at all. So, the other thing, can you provide the executive order number for improving oversight of federal grant making? I don't have it off the top of my head. There is a link to it here on this slide, or if you just do Google search for oversight of federal grant making executive order, you should be able to find it. So hopefully we can get that information. So the second main change that thank you, Chris. The second main area where we've seen and as I've already mentioned, funding cuts. We've seen, the cuts to existing grants and institutions, as well as some kind of, other approaches that one could consider funding cuts. And that's, many of the federal funders have slowed their spending it'll be very interesting to see what happens at the end of the fiscal year. If there's unspent money, what's going to happen? There's it seems to be pretty clear legal precedent for the need for agencies to spend money once it's allocated by Congress. But there have been, pretty open discussions at federal funding levels about how they are looking to challenge that historic trend. And we'll have to really see how that follows through, in the near term. But the big thing is going to be watching the future. So what's going to happen for next fiscal year? And as I mentioned, we're currently in the budget reconciliation process. And, so there's a lot of changes going on. The one, I dare to say, positive bit of news that I've seen over the last few months is, a lot of the budget process starts by the Trump administration putting out their desired budgets, and some of those cuts were very significant. And even in areas that had historically been received a fair amount of bipartisan support. And so, that left a lot of people very scared. But now, as some of the kind of specific spending bills that are coming out of both the House and the Senate and are going through committee, and we're seeing things, we're seeing much smaller cuts, especially at the Senate level. Senate, we're seeing a lot of those big Trump proposed cuts be relatively negated. The House is somewhere in the middle, so it'll be a big thing to know not only what passes in each of the individual houses, but how those are reconciled. So that's something that we'll keep an eye on. But and then just in other sort of a general trend, and not surprisingly, really seeing across the board bigger cuts to Department of Education than NEA, NEH, then to NSF to NIH, and then to finally to DoD being the agency that's really retaining most of its funding. So again, a lot to watch in the fall to see what happens in all of those areas. And then finally, and I think probably less significantly, but it is a big kind of federal level change that we're potentially looking into is the use of AI in grant writing. And many in the field were really anticipating, a couple years ago when ChatGPT first came out, we were really going to see a lot of federal agencies not allowing it as part of the grant writing process. And so I think many people were kind of waiting and waiting until, for the federal funders to make it more challenging. And then as time went on, we didn't actually see challenges, and we really saw, if any, the only thing consistently saw, and not to say that there weren't a few exceptions to this, is that the only really limitations were around where AI could accidentally lead to either sort of plagiarism or academic dishonesty, and then in that case that would be a problem. But otherwise there was no real limitations on what could be done if you avoided those particular issues, and this is true up until about just a few weeks ago, where we saw the NIH release a new policy and a sort of a side effect that I had not thought of personally, but AI does allow writing to be more efficient, and what NIH was seeing was that they were getting at least a few investigators who were putting in 40 applications within a particular cycle, largely that they'd never seen before that they ascribed to AI. And that led to, just sort of the potential challenges that are come with having to review that named proposal. So this is the kind of first, large federal funder where we've seen a policy unrelated to AI. And the statement included kind of two changes. So one, that NIH will no longer consider applications that are either substantially developed by AI or contain sections substantially developed by AI to be original ideas of the applicants, and they will be removed. And then relatedly, they are going to now limit each PI to 6 applications per calendar year. And this is something that had never been implemented before. And so NIH, very large federal grant maker, but and many of the changes that we've seen, in other areas have really kind of started with NIH and then moved on to other funders. So, for example, the indirect cost rate was first implemented, or the potential changes to indirect cost rates happened first at NIH and now has kind of trickled down. So, it may be that there are other federal funders out there who are going to follow suit. So you're really going to want to watch this space to know, if that is something that you're using, a tool that you're using, to be aware of, any other potential changes there. So, again, lots of, that's just, I think probably the most important topics that, are going on so far. And so now I'm going to switch gears here, and given all these changes, what can you do about it? What can you, how can you continue to be an effective grant writer, in this kind of unpredictable, changeable environment? And I'm going to try to break it down to sort of 4 kind of key points, and sort of which point is going to be most appropriate for you is really going to depend on, the alignment between your primary research area and any changes in those funding priorities that either your funder or the federal government more generally may be interested in. So some of you, are likely unaffected by some of these changes, and others of you are, the field in which you worked on is now no longer fundable. And then other people more in between. So I'm going to give try to cover advice for all of those, all that full continuum as best as possible. So first and foremost, despite sort of how challenging it seems, if you are still in an area where, there is possibility for funding, even if, we are potentially looking at federal budget cuts for the funder that you are going to be working with, is to keep trying. Because at the end of the day, we can talk about, other potential funders and pivoting a bit to foundation funding or other non-federal sources. But at the end of the day, the amount of money that the federal government has historically spent, and even with budget cuts will spend in the future, is really much, much bigger than what's available at the foundation level for almost all fields. That's not 100% true, but there's still people pursued federal funding because that's where a lot of the money was. And so I'll dive into some details about how do you go about continuing to pursue funding. If you are an area that was more affected, then it's smart, if you haven't already done so, to start thinking about what's my plan B and what's my plan C going to be. And I'll bring in some examples from some of the work that I've done with other individuals as part of Hanover, some guidance that I've given them, some thoughts that I've had to hopefully help with that. And then third is to, and potentially relatedly, diversifying your funding portfolio. So, there are lots of non-federal funding opportunities out there. We'll talk a little bit about how they're different. And then again, I referenced my colleague Rob Guroff's talk from a couple months ago for details of that. We'll make sure to get you access to that as well. And then finally, if funding is out there, and things become so competitive that that finding funding for your work becomes impossible or nearly impossible, how do you stay productive? To keep yourself prepared for any potential future changes. So, in terms of keep going again, if your work, and many people are not affected by these funding changes, there is still money available for them. How do you go about positioning your work if you want to continue to pursue federal funding? So, first and foremost, trying to stay current on funding, on agency priorities. Sometimes these are easier to find. We will have to see if they're sort of with some of the new executive order that I mentioned earlier, if there's now some greater clarity that's going to come out, especially for once those political appointees are established, about what those priorities are. But, in whatever way possible, and again, I think, keeping in touch with the program officer, as I'm going to talk about in a minute, is going to be a great way to go about doing that. And then, related to that, keeping track of, the sort of these broader nationwide funding priorities. So, instances, areas like, knowing what executive orders are out there, it will help you guide that. Related to the executive order, emphasizing measurable outcomes. So, there is a general trend, I think, or there will be a general trend towards really making the value of the work that you're doing even more viewable to lots of different stakeholders, and so making sure that you're building grants around that. Those kind of outcomes will be important. And then kind of relatedly, if there are either community or industry partnerships that you can integrate your work to, even all the better. I think there's going to be, again, more emphasis, potentially on sort of academic and industry, or academic and community relationships. So not just kind of research that is only reaching out to other people within the pretty narrow academic research community. And then, many people have asked about this, is what I spend a lot of my time doing, is, avoiding potentially problematic keywords when writing proposals. And there's a lot of documents that were shared early on in all of these changes. And people ask me, is this keyword okay to include? Is that one not? There are very few official lists. My resource that I go to, I've got linked here, is from a Senate report from Ted Cruz back actually before the second Trump administration began. That was part of a Senate report, which is sort of a detailed report. And as part of that report, there's actually sort of a method section about how they identified grants that they felt were not in alignment with the type of priorities that federal funding agencies should have. In this case, it was specific to NSF, but I think there's a lot of great detail in, here were the particular keywords they looked at, in different areas. And I think it's probably about the most exhaustive list that I've seen out there, in terms of a resource, which means it's not going to, it means that list may change, or the particular funder you're looking at may have other keywords that they are looking for, but it's about as good of a resources as any. And then finally, as I've already mentioned, reaching out to program officers has always been really important, especially in the kind of early stage grants. So maybe you've written, the one-page summary document that many funders have, and reaching out to a program officer, knowing, hey, is this going to be in alignment with with the agency priorities? Is doing that sooner rather than later will be really helpful for you to hopefully avoid putting too much effort into developing a project that's really not going to be fundable for that particular agency. And then finally, we're also have seen in the last few months some changes to the notice of funding opportunities, or NOFOs. And so you're going to really want to look at, if you've historically been applying to the same funding opportunity over and over again, or the same, set of funding opportunities, really doing a deep dive into how those have changed over the last year, to really know how you want to sort of change the way that you write, or maybe the way that you structure, or the points of emphasis that you have within your particular project. And again, if you do have questions about specific funding opportunities and what they're really looking for, again, program officers are going to be your best resource. Okay, then, if for whatever reason, your area is, that it's going to be deprioritized, with the new federal guidelines, how do you go about, addressing that? And, my biggest piece of advice is, some advice that my graduate advisor gave me, that he called the CUTE principle, which is keep your options open, Tiger. Which I have remembered for now about 2 decades. And I think it's a really great thing, especially for those of you who might be early career, just sort of understanding that, things will, even though if many of you are highly productive and are going into your careers with a very clear plan of where you see yourself going, what you would like to be doing, hurdles are thrown in front of us, like all these changes to the federal funding priorities, and we have to be able to keep our options open. And so, your plan B is really needs to think about sort of both thinking of your, is it possible to do related work that's going to that will keep you competitive if prior funding priorities return, or allow you to continue your career if they don't return. So I think, there, among many investigators, there is kind of a bit of an assumption that at some point in the future, things will go back to what was called normal. So what was happening with, in the years prior to the new administration. And I think it's unclear whether that's going to happen. And I think, at this point in time, most people are kind of adjusting to that possibility. But it is very important to be explicit about that, is that, you don't want to just sort of put things on hold, hoping that things are going to come back to the way that they were. And then relatedly, you also need to be realistic about how far what I call camouflaging or sort of changing keywords or just, doing the same work but pitching it a little differently is really going to get you. Because I think some of the early cuts that we saw were really kind of guided by pretty simple methodologies looking at keywords. I think those are going to get more sophisticated as, we've got actual, subject matter experts who's going to be looking at your work and knowing whether it's going to be in alignment with the funding opportunities. Um, and again, it's oftentimes good, even if you don't have to, having a plan B in place is great, even because, we've seen funding priorities change, and even if you seem to be good right now, that doesn't mean in the future things won't change again. So with that in mind, I think, a couple different strategies going forward to this plan B is, first having projects of different scales and financial requirements. So, it may require, especially if you're doing something a little different than what you've historically done, scaling back a little bit, doing a smaller project, getting some funding to do that, to then, build up and move forward again. And then if possible, try to build a larger project around one that you really want to propose. So I had a really interesting example of this, of someone who was looking at health disparities in a particular ethnic group. And, that was likely to be inconsistent with priorities. But because this person was actually using an existing data set, some existing kind of big data sets, I suggested to her, well, why don't you do that same project, but also, apply those same analysis plans that you had for that kind of subset of the data to the full data set, and then you pitch it really about that particular health condition, that would be sort of informing on how it affects lots of different people, not just that particular subpopulation that you're looking for. And even if that's sort of not the way that you would like to pitch it in terms of why you think it's important to study that subpopulation, it is a way around to do the work that you want to do, but still be able to do it in the current funding environment. And then, kind of relatedly, consider any projects that use similar methods, but maybe on a slightly different topic. So, the more that you can sort of translate what you've done in the past, even if just sort of methodologically, if not kind of conceptually, that will sort of allow you to utilize your previous successes, as well as, again, if funding priorities return to what they are, then you'll be more easily able to return to the topic area that maybe you are sort of most passionate about. And then finally, you want to start really thinking creatively about collaboration. So if you need to change topics, sometimes the best way to do that is by working with someone else who is working in that potential area. And you can sort of do collaborations in two ways. One is sort of where you are leading the collaboration, you're bringing in other people, or the reverse, where you're seeking other people, seeking to kind of contribute to someone else's larger project. And certainly there are ways in which both can work pretty well. And but collaborations are great. One of the things you do want to be is pretty thoughtful about how you go about pursuing them. So before you reach out to people, really thinking about what do you want to do, what expertise and experience do you need, how many people do you need? In general, the smaller the better. And then also some plans about how you're going to sort of structure the work and do the work, and how are the team members going to work together. And a really good resource for if you are seeking collaborations is either as you were thinking about them, or even once you've established them and you're starting to work together, is the NIH has what's called a multiple PI plan. So this is a required attachment that really makes you think through the collaboration on and a lot of different topics. from governments and how you're going to, an organization structure, how you're going to communicate, how you're going to make decisions, lots of different, really thinking through the details of the collaboration. It's I think a really great resource, even if you're not an NIH investigator, just in terms of thinking about how to go about, collaborating very effectively. And then, if, sort of that plan B, oftentimes will require, or even if you don't have a plan B, but maybe the main federal funder that you were looking to pursue is no longer funding work in your area, there are oftentimes opportunities to diversify your funding opportunities. So, as I mentioned before, it's really valuable to have small and large funding opportunities. For any type of research area that you might be in. And again, some of the best places to start if there are internal funding opportunities, seeking those out. Um, but you may need to go to, outside non-federal funding opportunities. And, as I already mentioned, my colleague Rob gave a detailed talk on this. In general, those non-federal funding opportunities tend to be smaller in scale. They tend to be a lot more relationship based, so they are sometimes take more time to develop successful applications for it. You've got to establish a relationship with the funder, and my colleague Rob did go through in a lot of detail. Really great resource there. So I'm just gonna kind of recommend you seek that out and check that out if that's something that you are interested in. The other challenges is there are the non-federal funding. There's, lots of different organizations that give out money, and just finding those opportunities can be really challenging. And again, that's another topic that my colleague had already talked about. And then finally, you want to maintain productivity. So even if you're not able to achieve funding at sort of where you would want to, or what you've done in the past, really being productive in terms of publications, because those are going to be critical for any funding opportunities, and historically always have been as well. If there's kind of existing data sets, so sometimes funding is required really to collect new data. Sometimes if there are existing data sets out there, either that you've already collected or that might be out there in your field, another way to keep productive even without the financial support. And then finally, you can also start to think a little bit about building capacity for future large scale projects. Especially if you're maybe later in your career, some developing some, and there are those kind of large scale opportunities that are still out there. Developing some collaborations, develop some track records for working together as a team to think about putting together a larger scale proposal that you could integrate your work into. And then finally, I know I'm a bit over time, so I'll just show you a couple of different Hanover tools that we have available. So we've got things like a calendar for non-federal funding, non-federal research, when different ones are available. We also have our own kind of small funder search. So you can go through and look at by topic area about what areas you're working in, what focus areas, what grant sizes, etc. And we've got some resources there, and I've got again link there. We've got some other webinars that on similar topics like the one talking about today, as well as our online Grants Learning Center, where we have lots of different modules that then teach you a little bit about the grant writing process, and we also have some really good non-federal funding resources there as well. So with that, I apologize for going over just a little bit, and go back on video, and we'll see. I'll take questions for about 5 minutes, and then I know we have an announcement at the end. So happy to take any questions about the content that I talked about today. And again, feel free to either unmute yourself or just drop any questions you might have in the chat. Maybe if there are any, again, I know I talked pretty broadly, so if you had any questions about, how some of the changes might apply either to the particular funder that you're looking at or, to a particular area of research that you are maybe struggling with trying to know how to handle in the current environment, or, any questions about, topic areas that may or may not be sort of aligned with current funders. Yeah, so we got a question here about will the slides be available? Can we send them to colleagues? Yep, we'll make sure to distribute the slides to you. Yep, and the
I just wanted
recording
to
as
mention
well.
that I just wanted to not ask a question, but just mention that this content has been really terrific. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Oh, and the one other thing in terms of Hanover resources I did forget to plug is we do have an ongoing podcast called the Hanover Grant Rant that myself and a colleague really talk about sort of all of these federal changes, and we've we that we put out every couple of weeks to keep for those of you who are kind of struggling to keep up with all the changes that are going on at the federal level. That's sort of a nice resource that if you want to, we keep it pretty short, we keep it pretty focused, so they're usually 10 minutes to maybe 20 minutes if there's lots of news. So another great resource, if you need some help, keeping track of all the different news that's coming out in the grant world. All right, well, Chris, do we maybe want to go to the announcement and then if anyone thinks of anything else, I can take a couple last minute questions.
Sure. So is Marie Dumond on? I think she was the one that was going to give the announcement.
Yes, I am here. Um, yeah, thank you. Thank you for that wonderful thing. I wanted to share, especially because related to everything that Stephen was just discussing, if you need a plan B or you're interested in diversifying your portfolio, we have something you might find as helpful. AU's Valoric Center for Entrepreneurship, together with AU's Translating Research into Action Center, is combining forces, teaming up to bring you a series of 3 workshops on entrepreneurship this fall. I'm going to drop in the chat a little blurb about this workshop series and with more information and a registration link. But if you're looking for a new way to new ways to fund your research, business skills and entrepreneurial mindset could be a key resource for you. So we would love to have you. It's open to all AU researchers, all faculty and postdocs. And so that information should be in the link in the chat. And if you, of course, you can reach out to me. My email is mdumund@american.edu, and we would love to have you join that series. Thank you.
Yeah, and that's a great alternative. Thank you so much for bringing that up that I hadn't really focused on in this particular talk, but I think some of more of these entrepreneurial opportunities are I think they're probably going to see an increase in that in that space. So I think even if it's just a sort of an initial discussion, if I know many academics that's not sort of part of the way that they think, but I know there are a lot of great people out there who that's their area of expertise, and they can help you think about how to moving your work in that particular area.
I have a question. It's related to an application, like an answer, an NSF proposal we sent, and I like your message of keep trying. We're not sure what to do. We received I forgot exactly what it is, but fundable but priority medium. Is that a good thing? Should we keep trying? we are a little discouraged. How do you interpret that kind of rating?
Yeah, I mean, it would. I think that a rating that would not make me give up. You know, with any revision, the critical thing is, what did they not like about the proposal, and waiting to get back any sort of additional feedback on that is going to be critical because there's some things that are easily changeable. There are some things if the problem was about they just were not excited about your core content area. And there's nothing methodologically that you could fix that could improve that. So, something I'd want to dive in a little bit more, and that's something that Hanover does as well. So, we will do consultations where we'll take a look at your proposal, the reviewer feedback that you get, and help kind of you develop a plan of, strategically, how do you go about, what should I do next? Should I, put in a resubmission with the same project? Should I really change the project? And that's something that at Hanover we can help support.
Great, thank you.
All right, we got maybe just a couple minutes left. So, anyone else have any final questions? Or Chris and Katie, any closing comments? Oh, Katie, you are muted.
Thanks. I'm dropping into the chat Jennifer Marr's email address because the plug you gave for the kind of consultation we can provide on resubmissions or other proposal types of questions, I think was really great, Steve. So I just want to put the contact email here for everybody. Otherwise, that's all from me.
Great. And just to echo what Steve said earlier, we will be sharing the slides and the recording with Jennifer. So if you want to access those, I would also encourage you to contact her as well for those materials. But otherwise, thank you all for joining us this afternoon.
All right, take care, everybody.